let's talk about Ukraine and some developments in that region. Within 24 hours, President Zelensky has asked the U.S. for more help, right? Because we need to continue to open our wallets and send more weapons, no matter where they end up.
And more money, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then he turned around and asked for help from China. Now, just yesterday, we reported that he said, hey, we really would like China to join us in this fun sanctions club and start to sanction Russia. Now he says he really would like to talk with China and specifically President Xi directly to talk to him about how he could hurt Russia through sanctions, right? And of course, we know China and Russia have really good economic relationships now and in the recent past. And so, of course, China doing something like this would harm Russia, but China has refused to condemn Russia. China has refused to really take a side. Just today, President Vladimir Zelensky said he wants to discuss the Russian invasion of the country with Chinese President Xi Jinping directly, and said he hoped that China might review its attitude towards Russia in light of its invasion of Ukraine.
Okay.
He says, I would like to talk directly. I had one conversation with Xi Jinping that was a year ago. Then he says, since the beginning of this large-scale aggression on February 24th, we have officially asked for a conversation, but we haven't had any conversation with China, even though I think that would be helpful. He turned around and called China a very powerful state.
I mean, how are you reading this without laughing? Because like he literally thinks like Xi Jinping is going to come to his defense right now. Like, hey, I'm trying everything I can. I'm getting money from America and NATO. I'm also going to get support from China. Xi Jinping, he's going to get on the phone with me and going to maybe send some HIMARS of their own to this region.
Well, my conspiratorial mind went to the place that perhaps the United States asked him to say something like this so that the media would shine a spotlight on China's refusal to help, and we could continue to demonize China.
I like that you're thinking in this way. I hadn't thought of that angle on this because
we
know that
this is just what
we know that Zelensky is a puppet, right? And that he doesn't say anything that's not already handed to him.
That's sort of where that came from.
That's where your conspiratorial mind went on this. So here's the second quote in this piece. He says, I'm confident and I'm sure that without the Chinese market for the Russian Federation, Russia would be feeling complete economic isolation, Zelensky told the Post. That's something that China can do to limit the trade with Russia until the war is over. Okay, if you know anything about China's Belt and Road Initiative, you know it has far-reaching tentacles, both from rail lines and roadways and relationships and currency and what Russia and the BRICS nations, China, India, South Africa, and Brazil just agreed to, basically, a solidification of a reserve currency that goes against the United States dollar as the world reserve currency.
Right.
You're basically asking China to throw in the towel on this economically, like to literally put in trade sanctions or block trade with Russia.
Yes. And then also, well, so much of this war is funded on the U.S. dollar, right? And so why would China do something to further strengthen the dollar when we are at a Cold War? A nasty one, a hot one.
Maybe it's like a hot war. It's turning hot now.
Yeah.
Forget being a Cold War. It's now a hot war. We've seen what's happening over the past few days. Meanwhile, another really interesting angle in Ukraine is what Amnesty International did over the past 24 hours, which Amnesty International, we've been waiting for them to weigh in on this. They tweeted this and wrote an entire dossier basically about Ukraine. Here it is. Ukrainian forces have put civilians in harm's way, they say, by establishing bases and operating weapons systems in populated residential areas. Holy shit.
Okay.
Are you kidding me?
We got a community strike on YouTube for saying that there were extremists inside the Ukrainian army that were purposely putting civilians in harm's way because we were listening to independent journalists who were there, right?
The evidence was overwhelming.
Amnesty International has sent independent researchers and found this too. So they say they have witnessed Can I refer to this now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's the
They
article.
have witnessed Ukrainian forces putting civilians in harm's way by establishing bases and operating weapon systems in populated residential areas, including in schools and hospitals, and as they repelled the Russian invasion that began in February. The report goes on, most residential areas where soldiers located themselves were kilometers away from front lines. Viable alternatives were available that would not endanger civilians, such as military bases. So think about that. Like, you could choose to set up your army at a military base, but instead you choose a kindergarten, right? Or densely wooded areas also were available, or other structures farther away from residential areas. In the cases documented, Amnesty International is not aware that the Ukrainian military, who located themselves in civilian structures in residential areas, asked or assisted civilians to evacuate nearby buildings, a failure to take all feasible precautions to protect civilians. So they are, in fact, setting up in these areas and using civilians, right? Civilians are getting harmed. And this quote from the Secretary General of Amnesty International says, being in a defensive position does not exempt the Ukrainian military from respecting international humanitarian law, which requires all parties to avoid locating within densely populated areas.
Now,
this matters.
Now, we've had journalists here on the show who've been covering this for months, right? They've been blocked, they've been banished, you name it, right? But they've continued on in their amazing work.
They've been personally attacked, called conspiracy theorists, put on like this big NBC hit piece calling them crazy, right? Because they live in this region and are talking about this aggression towards Ukrainian people
for the last 8 years.
Well, and on Zelensky's kill list.
Yes. In fact, Scott Ritter just published a piece yesterday on this strike list. Like, it exists. And finally, I think, the international community is waking up to what we've been reporting here for months. And, it's
remember,
been called
we showed
Russian
that video.
propaganda and all of this stuff, right? We showed a video, maybe you're going to say the same thing I was, which is...
Yep, I was.
Kindergarten teachers, right? It was kindergarten teachers, preschool teachers who were yelling. They are Ukrainian teachers, and they were yelling at the soldiers, like, why are you putting these weapons on our roof? There's a field over there. Go to the field. Use the field. Please don't use our preschool. And why? It's used basically as a human shield. Like,
Yes.
That's the idea that you're using. And I see people in the chat saying exactly that it's human shields.
And plus, it makes the American propaganda a lot more, like, they can say, oh, Russia attacked schools.
Yes.
But they leave out the nuance.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, and many people, I just saw someone in the chat yesterday saying, why are we all, bashing Ukraine and celebrating Russia? That's not what we're doing. We're trying to figure out what Ukraine is actually doing with the weapons and the money that we send, because the longer we drag this war out, the more children, civilians, women, and families will be killed, right? This matters because the United States government has known for months that there are years that there are extremists inside the Ukrainian military. They've known and still freely open their wallets, pretend that doesn't exist. It matters when we support an ongoing war and delay peace talks, right? Because we dig our heels in the sand. People are dying. Peace talks right now, today.
So what are we doing, right? We are continuing to funnel. So NATO over the past 24 hours, Finland and Sweden now, the United States Congress in an unanimous vote. One person held out. It was Senator Josh Hawley, to not allow them in, only for a procedural reason. Like, he's like, we should be focused on China. But he was all in on it, right? So overwhelming now, expanding NATO funneling weapons like crazy, and billions of dollars in weapons into Ukraine, right? So what has been happening to those weapons? Well, now we know, as the Eastern Front has been totally collapsing, that civilian areas are being hit with NATO weapons. So money that you are paying, if you happen to live in a NATO country, and your money, your tax dollars, going to support this, these weapons are going into Ukrainian civilian areas. I want to play a video. This is from this morning. These are NATO weapons that they've analyzed going into civilian areas. Going to play it. Watch. That's a Russian. That's a Ukrainian shell.
Тип снаряда.
Тип снаряда?
Ну, в смысле, да, что в 155-х.
See the press there? That's a NATO standard. That's a NATO standard shell. The eastern front of Ukraine is collapsing. Ukraine is getting desperate. Continued bombings of residential areas, including playgrounds and schools, are unfolding at this area. Ukrainian troops shelled the Donetsk Drama Center yesterday. Here is a video of this. This is the Donetsk Drama Center and blurred out bodies in the background. So blurred out, you can see those. But yes, this is, again, these are civilian areas, shopping districts, playgrounds, the continued shelling in this area as this, total collapse is unfolding. There's no reason for this at all. Eva Bartlett, I spoke to her this afternoon. She is in a hotel that was attacked this morning, bombed this morning. So again, I love it when journalists sit in New York City, and they write these articles that are full of propaganda, but they're not true. We saw that with NBC. NBC did that hit piece on these journalists. They're not even there. They're not even in the region, and they're not even physically there. These journalists are in a hotel that's being bombed as we speak. So
was she in there when it was bombed? Is she okay?
Yeah, she's okay. I spoke to her this afternoon.
Jeez.
We were going to do an interview this afternoon, but it's obviously that's her safety is more important than an interview. But she did send notes this afternoon on what's been unfolding. So here I'm going to put up a message she sent earlier. Over the past 24 hours from 8 a.m. on August 3rd to 8 a.m. on August 4th, as a result of shelling of the VFU in the territory of Donetsk People's Republic, 2 people were killed. Another 15 civilians were injured, 4 of them blown up by those pedal mines, which we'll get to in a minute. Those PFM mines, these pedal mines we'll get to. Then she goes on to say, Ukraine has been shelling central Donetsk since an hour and a half ago. It died down. People went inside to document went outside to document the damage. It started up again about 5 minutes ago. I waited before writing about this, but by now it's all over the media. A dead woman lies outside the hotel. And I want to just show you some of the areas that she witnessed this afternoon or earlier today. Playgrounds that are being attacked. Under what circumstances would you attack a playground? Like, these are playgrounds. Look at this. There's a teeter-totter and NATO shells there. Can we go back to those? Sorry. Go back to this playground.
The seesaw.
Seesaw.
It's the same thing. I'm just teasing.
Teeter-totter, slide. Deliberately targeting these, playgrounds.
Civilian areas,
Civilian areas. Under what circumstances? No Russian army around.
And consistent with the Amnesty International reporting, since they are then sending investigators in, she has documented Russian troops actually evacuating places that had civilians, unlike the Ukrainian army, right? Mm-hmm. And she has been attacked for that as well.
So I want to talk about these pedal mines. And we need to talk about these because this is a violation of international law, right? This is specifically what Amnesty International is talking about. So I want to play this footage here. We'll play, yes, that video there. I'm going to play this, sound up full. This is Eva Bartlett's coverage. What this guy, before I play it, let me set the stage for this, okay? What this guy is doing, he's using a rubber tire, to explode some of these mines that are just scattered around the neighborhood by the Ukrainian army, just scattered around residential areas and so forth. And this individual saw an old man with like a stick. Old men walk with canes and stuff. And they're always walking around the streets and staying high to feed. He was about to poke it with his cane, and he would have been blown up as a result. He yelled and stopped him from doing it. And then he exploded the mine. You can see how little pressure it takes for these things to explode. This is Eva Bartlett's reporting. Watch.
Keep your eyes down. That's the advice walking around Donetsk now, after Ukraine fired missiles containing butterfly or petal mines last night. They litter the streets, parks, apartment courtyards. They are everywhere. And because of their small size and neutral color, they're easy to miss. One fatal step and that's your foot or leg gone.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
So they're so tiny.
Well,
Do you
think
see
about
them?
like curious kids.
Well,
Yeah.
that's exactly
Like
it.
You couldn't let your kids
I
go
saw
outside.
a picture. Yeah, I saw a picture of one that she shared that it was surrounded by a bunch of leaves, and you could not discern it from the leaves. Like you would have been walking through a pile of leaves and stepping on those things.
Yeah, exactly. And they, the thing is, they explode with such force that they're not going to kill a man. They'll take your leg off, but they won't kill a man. But a kid goes up and plays with them, it's instant. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. So we have some photos, close-ups, so you can see a little bit closer what these things look like. I mean, they're hard to see. They look like leaves, right? And they take very little pressure to activate. And again, these are a violation of international law. See them just scattered around. They throw them right into residential areas. Here's the size of it. You can see next to a lighter to give you a sense of how big these things are.
And so she points out that because they are in this plastic casing, they are undetectable by metal detectors. So even if you sent out troops to try and find them, it would have to be quite a manual process with a very dangerous failure rate.
Right. Just awful. I mean, they are a violation. They are prohibited by the Ottawa Convention, which was ratified by Ukraine. So Ukraine put their stamp of approval on this, ratified by Ukraine. And this is what's happening in that area. As, again, we covered the prison angle on this. We went and retread it from last night. But now we have word today from Russia saying that they have proof in reports in the press this afternoon. Russia says they have proof that the prison where the Ukrainian soldiers were being held was bombed by the Zelinskiy government. And we have separate confirmation from sources who were there and we spoke to in that area. And interviews like this are starting to cause major trouble for Zelinskiy when you have soldiers who are now speaking out about what they were forced to do, forced into becoming a soldier. They didn't even want to be.
Yes.
Forced, that's one piece of it. And then also to carry out horrible things that they were having to do against the people.
And not
civilians.
trained for any of that.
Yeah, awful. So I'm going to be speaking to Eva Bartlett more on this in the coming days once she is safe and in a location where I can speak with her about that. But unbelievable update from Amnesty International on Ukraine and Zelensky asking for Xi Jinping of China for help on that front.